For the next 2 days, Riley worked harder than she had in her entire life. She combed through catering catalogs, sample menus, and vendor references. She made spreadsheets, color-coded schedules, and cross-checked dietary preferences. She even taste-tested half a dozen sample pastries after work, which frankly, was the only part she excelled at effortlessly. By Thursday evening, she finally settled on a catering company that specialized in elegant, understated presentations. Their food was fresh, their reviews were stellar, and their delivery schedule was flawless. Perfect. She emailed Callum the details, then left the office with a lightness in her step. If everything went smoothly, she might actually impress him. Not because he'd eaten her pie, but because she could deliver real results. The next morning, she arrived early, determined to lock in the final confirmation with the caterer before Marlene even had a chance to breathe in her direction. She settled at her desk, took a calming sip of tea, dialed the vendor's number, and waited. A cheerful receptionist answered. "Good morning. Meadow and Birch Catering. How can I help you?" "Yes, hi." Riley sat straighter. "This is Riley Morgan from Hayes Consulting. I'm calling to confirm the Friday afternoon service." "Oh," the receptionist interrupted politely. "Your order was canceled yesterday afternoon." Riley froze. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "I think there's a mistake." "No mistake," the receptionist replied. "A woman from your company called to cancel." Very professional. She said plans had changed. Riley felt the world tilt. "A woman?" "Yes. She identified herself as your administrative supervisor." Riley closed her eyes. "Marlene." Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. Do you still have availability for tomorrow?" Riley asked, desperation cracking her voice. The receptionist sighed sympathetically. "I'm afraid we've been fully booked for weeks." "I'm so sorry." Riley hung up, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Around her, the office buzzed with normal morning energy. Keyboards clicked, printers hummed, someone laughed at a joke near the coffee machine. And in the middle of all that ordinary calm, her entire plan lay in ruins. She stood on autopilot and walked to Marlene's desk. "Marlene?" she asked, her voice too soft. Marlene didn't bother looking up from her screen. "What is it? Did you cancel the catering order I placed?" Marlene's lips curled into a smile so thin it could slice through steel. "Oh, that. Yes." Riley's breath caught. "Why?" "It was excessive," Marlene said simply. "The partners won't care what they eat. They're here for business, not snacks." "But the CEO." "The CEO," Marlene interrupted sharply, lowering her voice, "will not concern himself with how some pastries look on a table. And it's irresponsible to rely on you for something that important." She looked up finally, eyes gleaming with cold triumph. "I corrected your mistake. You should thank me." Riley stared at her, stunned. "But there's no food for the meeting now," she whispered. "It's today." "You're resourceful," Marlene said, turning back to her computer. "Figure something out." Riley felt heat rising in her eyes, not tears but anger, sharp and bright. But she forced herself to inhale, then exhale. Falling apart wouldn't help. She rushed to her desk, opened her laptop, and called every catering company within a 50-mile radius. All booked. All unavailable. She texted 2 bakeries she knew. They were overwhelmed with weekend orders. She checked with nearby cafes. Nothing ready on such short notice. Time was slipping through her fingers. People started glancing at the clock. The meeting was in 2 hours. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Then, suddenly, an idea sparked. A wild, desperate, absolutely insane idea. But it was the only one that stood a chance. She grabbed her things and ran for the elevator. Down the hall, she heard Marlene call out. "Running away already, Riley?" Riley didn't look back. She flew down to the street, hailed a cab, and directed it home. If no bakery could deliver what she needed, she'd have to become the bakery herself. By the time Riley stepped back outside, her heart was pounding from the mad dash through unfamiliar hallways, 2 wrong turns, and nearly tripping over a water cooler. But the contract was signed, stamped, sealed, and resting safely in her bag. 6:32 p.m. She had made it with barely a minute to spare. Cal's car was still waiting at the curb, headlights glowing softly in the dimming evening light. Riley pressed a hand to her chest, trying to catch her breath, and hurried toward the passenger side, deciding she'd earned a seat up front after all that chaos. She slipped in and shut the door with a loud exhale. "I didn't keep you long, did I?" she asked, brushing a stray hair from her cheek. Cal turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable but not unfriendly. "Not at all," he said. "You're remarkably fast for someone who claims to be clumsy." Riley puffed a small laugh. The survival instincts kick in when Marlene's wrath is looming. She has this way of sighing that makes you rethink every life choice. "Caos lips tugja upuart. Even noticed." "You've met her?" Riley asked, buckling her seatbelt. He paused just long enough for it to feel intentional. "Once or twice." "Did she terrify you too?" He kept his eyes on the road as he pulled away from the building. "I've seen worse." Riley stared at him wide-eyed. "Seriously? She terrifies me more than horror movies. At least in horror movies you can see the monster coming." Cal gave a soft laugh, low, warm, unexpected from someone with his calm, composed demeanor. As they joined the main street, the city opened before them in streaks of red brake lights and neon reflections. Evening commuters shuffled along the sidewalks, umbrellas tucked under their arms, the air heavy with the smell of rain that never quite arrived. Riley sighed dreamily. "You know, this city is kind of beautiful at night, even if it's a giant stress factory." Cal glanced at her. "You've lived here long?" "Almost 3 years. Still learning how not to look like a tourist." She leaned back in her seat. "What about you? You don't seem like you're originally from here." He hesitated, the way someone does when debating whether to reveal something. "I moved here a long time ago," he said eventually. "For work." "Do you like it?" A pause. "There are days when it feels like home," Cal said. "And days when it's simply a place I sleep." Riley's smile softened. "I get that. Sometimes I feel like I'm just passing through, like everyone else is on track, and I'm still trying to find the right train." Cal's gaze flickered toward her again. "You think you're behind?" "Constantly," she admitted. "Everyone at the office looks like they were born knowing how to do everything. And she gestured vaguely at herself. "I'm a walking accident with a decent attitude." "Decent," he echoed. "My best feature." Cal's quiet laugh filled the car again. She was starting to like that sound. Traffic inched along, but for once Riley didn't mind the slowdown. The muted glow of streetlights flickered across Cal's face, softening his sharp features. He looked tired, not physically, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying a world only a few people ever see. She wondered what his story was. Not that she'd ask. She wasn't that nosy. "Well," she said brightly, breaking the growing silence, "since you're stuck with me, the least I can do is offer you something in return." Cal raised a brow. "Such as?" "Tea," Riley said simply. "Or coffee. Or water. Or something baked. Do you like baked things?" He blinked as if she'd spoken in ancient code. "Most people like baked things," he said carefully. "Good. Because I made these appleberry hand pies this morning, and they turned out amazing. You look like someone who could use sugar and a break." The confusion in his expression was almost comical. "You're inviting me to your home?" "Yes. You waited for me, you drove me, and you haven't complained even once, which is honestly impressive. Besides, I promised it would only take 5 minutes." She shrugged. "You look exhausted, Cal, really. Let me help a little." He stared ahead, fingers tapping once against the steering wheel. It was clear he wasn't used to strangers offering him anything, least of all warmth. 5 minutes, he repeated. Riley nodded. 5. I'll even set a timer. Slowly, almost reluctantly, Cal nodded back. All right. Riley broke into a grin. Perfect. My place is only 10 minutes from here. 10 minutes later, after weaving through quiet residential streets lined with trees and warm window lights, Cal pulled up in front of Riley's small brick apartment building. He looked up at it through the windshield, as though stepping into another world. Riley unbuckled, practically bouncing. Come on. I'll make you the best tea you've ever had. Cal inhaled deeply, a steadying breath, then opened his door. For a man who seemed prepared for anything, he looked strangely unprepared for this. And as Riley led him inside, she had no idea that with this single impulsive invitation, she had just cracked open a door that would change both their lives forever. For the next 2 days, Riley worked harder than she had in her entire life. She combed through catering catalogs, sample menus, and vendor references. She made spreadsheets, color-coded schedules, and cross-checked dietary preferences. She even taste-tested half a dozen sample pastries after work, which frankly was the only part she excelled at effortlessly. By Thursday evening, she finally settled on a catering company that specialized in elegant, understated presentations. Their food was fresh, their reviews were stellar, and their delivery schedule was flawless. Perfect. She emailed Callum the details, then left the office with a lightness in her step. If everything went smoothly, she might actually impress him. Not because he'd eaten her pie, but because she could deliver real results. The next morning, she arrived early, determined to lock in the final confirmation with the caterer before Marlene even had a chance to breathe in her direction. She settled at her desk, took a calming sip of tea, dialed the vendor's number, and waited. A cheerful receptionist answered. "Good morning. Meadow and Birch Catering. How can I help you?" "Yes, hi." Riley sat straighter. "This is Riley Morgan from Hayes Consulting. I'm calling to confirm the Friday afternoon service." "Oh," the receptionist interrupted politely. "Your order was canceled yesterday afternoon." Riley froze. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "I think there's a mistake." "No mistake," the receptionist replied. "A woman from your company called to cancel." "Very professional." She said plans had changed. Riley felt the world tilt. "A woman?" "Yes. She identified herself as your administrative supervisor." Riley closed her eyes. "Marlene." Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. Do you still have availability for tomorrow?" Riley asked, desperation cracking her voice. The receptionist sighed sympathetically. "I'm afraid we've been fully booked for weeks." "I'm so sorry." Riley hung up, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Around her, the office buzzed with normal morning energy. Keyboards clicked, printers hummed, someone laughed at a joke near the coffee machine. And in the middle of all that ordinary calm, her entire plan lay in ruins. She stood on autopilot and walked to Marlene's desk. "Marlene?" she asked, her voice too soft. Marlene didn't bother looking up from her screen. "What is it? Did you cancel the catering order I placed?" Marlene's lips curled into a smile so thin it could slice through steel. "Oh, that. Yes." Riley's breath caught. "Why?" "It was excessive," Marlene said simply. "The partners won't care what they eat. They're here for business, not snacks." "But the CEO." "The CEO," Marlene interrupted sharply, lowering her voice, "will not concern himself with how some pastries look on a table. And it's irresponsible to rely on you for something that important." She looked up finally, eyes gleaming with cold triumph. "I corrected your mistake. You should thank me." Riley stared at her, stunned. "But there's no food for the meeting now," she whispered. "It's today." "You're resourceful," Marlene said, turning back to her computer. "Figure something out." Riley felt heat rising in her eyes. Not tears, but anger, sharp and bright. But she forced herself to inhale, then exhale. Falling apart wouldn't help. She rushed to her desk, opened her laptop, and called every catering company within a 50-mile radius. All booked. All unavailable. She texted 2 bakeries she knew. They were overwhelmed with weekend orders. She checked with nearby cafes. Nothing ready on such short notice. Time was slipping through her fingers. People started glancing at the clock. The meeting was in 2 hours. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Then suddenly an idea sparked. A wild, desperate, absolutely insane idea. But it was the only one that stood a chance. She grabbed her things and ran for the elevator. Down the hall, she heard Marlene call out. "Running away already, Riley?" Riley didn't look back. She flew down to the street, hailed a cab, and directed it home. If no bakery could deliver what she needed, she'd have to become the bakery herself. Riley woke up the next morning with the distinct sensation of having dreamed something strange and warm. Duh. Laughter. A man in a suit sitting awkwardly in her tiny kitchen, eating pie like it was a memory. She lay in bed for a few seconds staring at the ceiling. Did that actually happen? Yes. Yes, it absolutely had. She groaned and rolled over, burying her face in the pillow. I fed pastries to a stranger, she mumbled, in my pajamas that had strawberries on them. But despite her embarrassment, she felt lighter, warm almost, as if a small part of the world had been temporarily kind. Unfortunately, that sensation lasted only until she walked into the office. The moment Riley crossed the threshold, Marlene Drake was already waiting. Arms crossed, face sharp enough to cut glass. There you are, Marlene said, tapping her heel impatiently. Late. I'm 3 minutes early, Riley replied weakly. Late, Marlene repeated, as if redefining the concept by sheer force. And so the morning began. Riley spent the first hour running pointless errands. Picking up copies Marlene didn't need, fetching coffee she wouldn't drink, and reorganizing binders that had already been alphabetized. Twice. By 10, Riley felt her soul leaving her body. Riley. Marlene's voice stabbed the air again. Bring this folder to the executive office on the top floor. And don't dawdle. Riley blinked. The top floor? You mean? Yes. Marlene was already shooing her away. And for heaven's sake, try not to embarrass yourself. Riley clutched the folder like it might bite her and headed toward the elevator, her stomach twisting. She'd never been to the top floor. Interns didn't go there. Assistants didn't go there. That was the kingdom of partners, vice presidents, and the company director. Rumors said the carpets were so soft you could fall asleep standing up. The elevator chimed, and the doors glided open into a silent hallway lined with frosted glass and hushed lighting. Riley stepped out carefully, half expecting a security guard to escort her back. She found the director's office easily, a tall set of doors with a brushed steel plaque. Callum Hayes, Executive Director. Her hand hovered before she knocked. Callum Hayes. The name was familiar somehow. She knocked lightly. Come in, called a calm voice from inside. Riley opened the door and froze so hard her soul tried to evacuate again. Sitting behind the large oak desk, in a tailored suit, with an expression of mild surprise, was Cal. Cal from the car. Cal from her kitchen. Cal who ate her pie like it healed his childhood. Except he wasn't Cal the driver. He was Callum Hayes, her company's CEO. Every neuron in her brain panicked simultaneously. Callum rose from his chair, composed and professional, but there was unmistakable gentleness in his eyes. Good morning, Riley. Riley opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She attempted again. Still nothing. Her brain managed one coherent thought. I told him Marlene was a hawk. I told him she terrifies me. I fed him pastries. Oh no. Oh no. She squeaked. You're? Yes, Callum said softly, as though easing her into consciousness. I am. You're my boss's 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 boss, she blurted. His lips twitched. Something like that. Riley pressed the folder to her chest like a shield. I thought you were the driver. I gathered that, he said. You were very confident giving me instructions. She made a strangled sound that might have been a whimper. Callum stepped closer, taking the folder from her hands with careful professionalism. If it helps, he said gently. I appreciated the company. And the tea. Riley stared at him, mortified beyond the capacity of language. I called you Cal, she whispered, as if confessing a crime. That is my name, he replied. Shortened but accurate. And I invited you into my apartment. You did, Callum said with that quiet, amused warmth she recognized from the night before. It was the most pleasant 5 minutes I've had all month. Riley's knees nearly gave out. He cleared his throat, resuming his formal tone. I'd appreciate if you could help with a few items this week. A partners meeting is approaching, and I need someone detail-oriented. A pause. And someone I trust. Riley blinked. Trust? Her? Ah yes. Of course. Anything. I mean not anything. Well, you know what I mean. His eyes softened even further. I do. Riley braced herself and asked, voice breaking. You're not mad I bossed you around? Finally, Callum's composure cracked for a moment. A real smile, warm and human, broke through. Riley, he said. I've been bossed around by people far worse than you, and none of them ever offered me pie. Heat rushed up Riley's neck like she'd been set on fire. Before she could die of embarrassment, Callum gestured to the door in gentle dismissal. You can go, he said. I'll be in touch. Riley nodded so fast she probably looked like a bobblehead and backed out of the office, closing the doors with trembling hands. The moment they shut, she slid down the hallway wall, pressing both palms to her face. Riley Morgan, she whispered, congratulations. You have just committed the most adorable disaster in corporate history. And somewhere behind the closed doors, Callum Hayes was still smiling. By lunchtime, the entire office was vibrating with a kind of gossip-charged electricity that only corporate environments can generate. Riley had barely stepped off the elevator when 3 analysts from finance swiveled their chairs toward her with predatory curiosity. Someone nearly spilled their yogurt trying to get a better look. Samantha from HR whispered loudly enough for the entire floor to hear. That's her. Riley wanted to turn around and check if someone else was standing behind her. No such luck. She was, without question, the her everyone meant. People she'd never spoken to were suddenly offering bright smiles. Others watched her like she was a newly discovered species. All because someone somehow had found out she'd been upstairs, had been in his office, and walked out alive. Riley tried to shrink into her desk, but Marlene descended on her like a bird of prey catching sight of a field mouse. There you are. Marlene's heels snapped sharply against the floor. Explain yourself. Riley blinked. About what? Why? Marlene hissed, leaning so close Riley could smell her expensive citrus perfume. Did the CEO request you by name this morning? Every head within a 10-meter radius strained to listen. I just delivered a folder, Riley said weakly. That's all. Marlene's eyes narrowed. And he needed to speak to you? Personally? I don't know, Riley said truthfully. He just did. Riley could practically feel the gossip absorbing this like fresh oxygen. But Marlene wasn't satisfied. Well. She straightened abruptly, voice going colder than ice water. Don't let it distract you from your responsibilities. I expect the quarterly binders reorganized by 2. And don't forget the expense receipts. That's 3 hours of work. Then work efficiently, Marlene replied, turning on her heel. Riley slumped in her chair. She had done nothing wrong. And yet she suddenly felt like she was walking around with a neon sign above her head. By early afternoon, she was halfway through sorting the binders when her desk phone rang. She jumped. No one called her desk. Ever. Hello, she answered carefully. A familiar voice flowed through the receiver, warm, even, and unmistakably authoritative. Riley? It's Callum Hayes. Riley almost dropped the handset onto her lap. Yes. Aquí. Good afternoon, sir. Across the room, 20 heads swiveled simultaneously toward her. I have a task for you, Callum continued, oblivious to the silent chaos he just unleashed. Could you stop by my office when you have a moment? Riley glanced at the mountain of binders on her desk. Marlene would probably combust. Sure, she said, heart pounding. I can come now. Perfect. See you shortly. He hung up. Riley set the receiver down with trembling fingers. A moment later, Marlene stormed over, face stiff with panic poorly disguised as irritation. Who was that? Riley swallowed. Mr. Hayes. Marlene blinked once, twice. Then her voice slid into a sugary sweet tone that made Riley's skin prickle. Well, don't keep him waiting. Go on. She even smoothed Riley's collar like a mother prepping a child for school photos. Go make us proud. Riley had never seen her smile like that. It was terrifying. She hurried toward the elevator and rode it up, palms sweating. When she reached Callum's office, she composed herself, knocked, and stepped inside. Callum was standing near the window, reviewing something on a tablet. When he turned, the shift in his expression was immediate. His shoulders eased. His features softened, almost like he'd been waiting for something, or someone familiar. Riley. Thank you for coming. She tried very hard not to stare at him. He looked different in daylight. Clearer, sharper, more real. What do you need? She asked, clasping her hands tightly behind her back. We have a partners meeting this Friday, Callum said. Multiple guests, long agenda, extended breaks. I want the reception table handled with detail and care. Riley blinked. You want me to organize that? Yes. Me. His lips twitched. Unless you know another Riley in this office. But I've never done anything like that. Aren't there people on the events team? There are, he said calmly. But they don't have your eye for detail. A beat. Or your understanding of warmth. Riley's breath caught. Callum handed her a folder. Inside were budgets, vendor lists, previous menus, everything she needed. You have full autonomy, he said. I trust your judgment. Trust. There it was again. Riley stared at him with wide, bewildered eyes. I'll do my best, she whispered. I know. For a moment, neither of them moved. Callum looked like he wanted to say more. Something softer, closer to the truth that quietly pulsed between them. But he stepped back, returning to his professional composure. You can go. If you need anything, let me know. Riley nodded, clutching the folder to her chest, and left the office feeling like gravity had shifted. By the time she returned to her floor, Marlene was waiting. Well, she demanded. Riley hesitated. He assigned me to organize the food reception for the partners' meeting. Marlene's face drained of color so fast Riley wondered if she should fetch water. Then her expression sharpened into something cold, calculating, and furious. Oh really? Marlene said, each word coated in poison. Is that so? And as Riley returned to her desk, she couldn't shake the icy feeling crawling up her spine. Something told her Marlene would not let this go easily. For the next 2 days, Riley worked harder than she had in her entire life. She combed through catering catalogs, sample menus, and vendor references. She made spreadsheets, color-coded schedules, and cross-checked dietary preferences. She even taste-tested half a dozen sample pastries after work, which frankly was the only part she excelled at effortlessly. By Thursday evening, she finally settled on a catering company that specialized in elegant, understated presentations. Their food was fresh, their reviews were stellar, and their delivery schedule was flawless. Perfect. She emailed Callum the details, then left the office with a lightness in her step. If everything went smoothly, she might actually impress him, not because he'd eaten her pie, but because she could deliver real results. The next morning, she arrived early, determined to lock in the final confirmation with the caterer before Marlene even had a chance to breathe in her direction. She settled at her desk, took a calming sip of tea, dialed the vendor's number and waited. A cheerful receptionist answered. Good morning. Meadow and Birch Catering. How can I help you? Yes, hi. Riley sat straighter. This is Riley Morgan from Hayes Consulting. I'm calling to confirm the Friday afternoon service. Oh, the receptionist interrupted politely. Your order was canceled yesterday afternoon. Riley froze. I'm sorry, she said slowly. I think there's a mistake. No mistake, the receptionist replied. A woman from your company called to cancel. Very professional. She said plans had changed. Riley felt the world tilt. A woman? Yes. She identified herself as your administrative supervisor. Riley closed her eyes. Marlene. Her heart dropped straight into her stomach. Do you still have availability for tomorrow? Riley asked, desperation cracking her voice. The receptionist sighed sympathetically. I'm afraid we've been fully booked for weeks. I'm so sorry. Riley hung up, her hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Around her, the office buzzed with normal morning energy. Keyboards clicked, printers hummed, someone laughed at a joke near the coffee machine. And in the middle of all that ordinary calm, her entire plan lay in ruins. She stood on autopilot and walked to Marlene's desk. Marlene, she asked, her voice too soft. Marlene didn't bother looking up from her screen. What is it? Did you cancel the catering order I placed? Marlene's lips curled into a smile so thin it could slice through steel. Oh, that. Yes. Riley's breath caught. Why? It was excessive, Marlene said simply. The partners won't care what they eat. They're here for business, not snacks. But the CEO. The CEO, Marlene interrupted sharply, lowering her voice, will not concern himself with how some pastries look on a table. And it's irresponsible to rely on you for something that important. She looked up finally, eyes gleaming with cold triumph. I corrected your mistake. You should thank me. Riley stared at her, stunned. But there's no food for the meeting now, she whispered. It's today. You're resourceful, Marlene said, turning back to her computer. Figure something out. Riley felt heat rising in her eyes. Not tears but anger, sharp and bright. But she forced herself to inhale then exhale. Falling apart wouldn't help. She rushed to her desk, opened her laptop, and called every catering company within a 50-mile radius. All booked. All unavailable. She texted 2 bakeries she knew. They were overwhelmed with weekend orders. She checked with nearby cafes. Nothing ready on such short notice. Time was slipping through her fingers. People started glancing at the clock. The meeting was in 2 hours. She could feel her pulse in her throat. Then suddenly an idea sparked. A wild, desperate, absolutely insane idea. But it was the only one that stood a chance. She grabbed her things and ran for the elevator. Down the hall, she heard Marlene call out. Running away already, Riley? Riley didn't look back. She flew down to the street, hailed a cab, and directed it home. If no bakery could deliver what she needed, she'd have to become the bakery herself. Riley burst into her apartment like a storm. She threw her bag on the couch, yanked her hair into a messy bun, and flew straight into the kitchen. Her heart hammered wildly, adrenaline buzzing under her skin. 2 hours. Less actually. 2 hours to pull off something that entire catering teams needed days to prepare. This is fine, she muttered to herself, tying on her apron with trembling hands. This is completely, totally fine. I've lost my mind, but that's fine too. She surveyed her supplies. Flour? Yes. Butter? Enough to supply a small village. Sugar, eggs, extracts, spices? Check, check, check. She had made pies, cakes, and cookies her whole life, for friends, for neighbors, for family holidays. This was different, yes, but not impossible. Probably. Riley rolled up her sleeves. Okay, she whispered. Let's make magic. Step 1, mini tarts. She whipped the dough, rolled it out, and pressed tiny circles into a muffin tin. Her movements were fast but precise. She didn't have time to mess up. Step 2, fruit compotes. Blueberry and lemon zest. Strawberry balsamic. A quick apple cinnamon. Step 3, tea cakes. Fast-baked sponge squares dusted with powdered sugar. Step 4, savories. Mini quiches. Spinach feta, mushroom thyme, and a last-minute mix of whatever vegetables she had in her fridge. By the time 1 hour had passed, her kitchen looked like a flour-dusted battlefield. Her cheeks were flushed, and sweat clung to her hairline. Another 30 minutes to go. She packed everything with meticulous care into boxes, layering parchment between each row. She added small handwritten labels. Not because she needed to, but because details mattered. Beautiful details. Details that might prove to Callum she wasn't just some nobody assistant. With 10 minutes to spare, she bolted out the door, waving at her bewildered neighbor as she sprinted down the stairs carrying 4 boxes like a frantic dessert delivery service. The cab driver stared at her when she dove into the back seat. Hayes Consulting, she gasped. Fast as you can, please, just don't kill us. He nodded with the solemnity of a man accepting a sacred mission. They sped across the city. Riley watched the minutes tick by, her pulse tripping over itself. 11:59 a.m. 1 minute before the partners' meeting. She jumped out of the cab, dropped a handful of crumpled bills onto the seat, and raced into the building, boxes stacked in her arms. She jabbed the elevator button so frantically that another employee gave her a disapproving frown. When the door slid open, she sprinted down the hall and skidded into the conference area just as several executives approached. They slowed when they saw her, flushed, breathless, and clearly one minor inconvenience away from a nervous breakdown. But the display she was setting up stopped them in their tracks. The table bloomed with warm colors and delicate plating. Tiny golden tarts glistened under the lights. Neat rows of miniature quiches sent up a buttery aroma. Tea cakes looked like soft little clouds dusted in sugar. The handwritten labels tied it all together. It looked professional, inviting, thoughtful. Not corporate catering, but personal artistry. Executives murmured in approval. Someone actually applauded quietly. Riley wiped her forehead, shaking slightly. And then she heard a smooth, familiar voice behind her. Riley. She froze. Slowly, very slowly she turned. Callum stood there, one brow raised, his expression unreadably intense. What happened? He asked softly. Her mouth opened, but sound didn't come out. Then his gaze drifted to the table. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then something warm sparked in his eyes. Surprise, admiration, something deeper. You made all this? Riley nodded weakly. The catering got cancelled. By whom? She hesitated. Telling the truth would cause a storm. A storm with consequences. I'll explain later, she whispered. Callum stepped closer. Not enough for others to notice, but enough for Riley's breath to catch. You saved the entire meeting, he said, his voice low so only she could hear. You. Alone. Riley swallowed. Cheeks burning. I just didn't want you to be disappointed. His eyes softened. Dangerously, devastatingly softened. Riley, he murmured. You continue to surprise me. She forgot how to breathe. Before she could respond, Marlene swooped into the room like a vulture sensing fresh prey. Mr. Hayes, she chirped shrilly. Is everything satisfactory? Callum turned his head slowly. Very slowly. If I wanted you involved, he said, calm and cool as polished glass, I would have asked. Marlene's smile cracked. Callum faced Riley one more time, his voice gentling again, the tone he reserved only for her. We'll talk after the meeting. And then he walked away, leaving Riley standing there, shaking, proud, terrified, and aware, painfully aware, that nothing between them would ever be the same again. The partners' meeting lasted 3 hours. 3 excruciating slow-motion hours during which Riley could do absolutely nothing except sit at her desk, pretend to work, and try not to die of nervous anticipation. Every so often, someone from the meeting would pass by the refreshments table. Riley watched from a distance as executives took a tart, or a quiche or 2 cakes at once. Some nodded approvingly. 2 even took photos. She should have felt relieved. Instead, her stomach was tied in knots. Because at some point in the next few minutes, Callum Hayes, the man who could make or break careers with a single sentence, was going to ask her what happened. And she had to tell him. Or lie. Or say something halfway true. None of these options sounded survivable. Around 3:10 p.m., the conference doors finally opened. Executives poured out, chatting, energized. A few gave Riley small nods of appreciation as they passed. Then Callum stepped out. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't stern either. His expression was thoughtful, intent, like he had questions lined up neatly in his mind, and he was walking toward the person who held all the answers. Riley's pulse shot up. He scanned the room once, found her immediately. He always seemed to, and nodded. Riley. My office. Please. A simple instruction, but it felt like a verdict. She followed him upstairs, her hands tightly clasped to keep them from shaking. His office door closed softly behind them, sealing them into that quiet world again. The sunlight from the tall windows painted warm stripes across the floor. Callum stood with his back to her for a moment, as if collecting his thoughts. Then he turned. Sit, he said gently. She did. He leaned against the edge of his desk, arms loosely crossed, not in anger, but in measured patience. Now, he said quietly. Tell me everything. Riley's throat tightened. She opened her mouth, but before she could speak, the words tangled, tripped, collapsed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I should have handled it better. His brows drew together. Handled what? She exhaled shakily. The catering. It was cancelled. I didn't know until this morning. I should have double-checked earlier and... Who cancelled it? His voice wasn't sharp, but it was firm, a tone that demanded honesty. Riley stared at her hands. Silence stretched between them like a wire pulled too tight. For your sake, Callum said slowly. I hope the hesitation isn't because you're trying to protect someone who doesn't deserve it. Her breath caught. He wasn't angry at her. He was concerned. Protective even. That made it worse somehow. She swallowed. It was Marlene. The words fell out like stones. Callum went still. Then his jaw tightened, barely but unmistakably. A flicker of cold displeasure crossed his face, like a shadow sliding across glass. She cancelled the catering, he repeated. Without speaking to me. Without speaking to you. Riley nodded weakly. and then expected you to fix the fallout. Another nod. He inhaled slowly through his nose, controlled, restrained, but filled with the kind of anger that wasn't loud, as it didn't need to be. Riley, he said, his voice low. You should have told me. I didn't want to make trouble, she whispered. He stepped closer, not intimidating, just present, grounding. You are not trouble, he said firmly. She looked up, startled. People who sabotage my staff are trouble, he continued. People who try to undermine you are trouble. He paused. You are not. Her chest tightened, a warm ache building behind her ribs. He held her gaze, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. You handled an impossible situation with creativity, initiative, and composure, he said. Most executives I've worked with couldn't have done what you did today. Riley stared at him, stunned. And, he added, a faint hint of amusement in his eyes, the quiches were excellent. Riley let out a breathy, nervous laugh. Callum continued watching her, too closely, too intently, and Riley suddenly felt like the air between them had shifted. Not just professional, not just appreciative. Something warmer, something dangerous. He took a small step back as if catching himself. I'll handle Marlene, he said, voice back to business but softer around the edges. In the meantime, I want you to take the rest of the afternoon off. Riley blinked. What? Why? Because you've earned it. And because you look like you might fall asleep standing up. She opened her mouth to protest, but he raised a hand gently. Riley, he said. Go home. Rest. She hesitated, then nodded. She stood, carrying her bag, and headed to the door. Just as she reached it, Callum spoke again, quietly. And Riley. She turned. He looked at her with that same softened, unreadable warmth from earlier. Don't ever think you need to hide things from me, he said. I want to know. Especially when it concerns you. Her heart tripped. Okay, she managed. She slipped out of the office before she dissolved into a flustered, overheated puddle on his expensive rug. As the elevator doors closed, she pressed her hand to her racing heart. Callum Hayes wanted to know when something concerned her. That alone could keep her up all night. Riley didn't remember the elevator ride down. She also didn't remember how she got out of the building, how she ended up on the sidewalk, or how her legs carried her 3 blocks before she finally realized she was even walking. Her body moved automatically. Her mind did not. Spun. Wildly. Uncontrollably. Callum's voice echoed through her skull in a loop. You are not trouble. I want to know. Especially when it concerns you. The city blurred around her, lights, traffic, chatter. All muffled as if she were underwater. When she finally reached her apartment, she closed the door behind her and leaned her forehead against it, exhaling. She was exhausted. Emotionally. Physically. Existentially. But beneath all of that was something else. A hum of warmth she couldn't suppress. She pushed herself off the door and kicked off her shoes, dropping her bag on the floor. The kitchen still smelled faintly of vanilla and butter from the morning's frenzy, and the sight made her smile despite everything. Her shoulders loosened. Her body remembered something it hadn't felt in a long time. Bride. She changed into soft clothes, an oversized t-shirt and loose cotton shorts, and collapsed onto the couch. She pulled her knees to her chest, letting the quiet of her apartment wrap around her like a blanket. For the first time since morning, she let herself breathe deeply. And then, slowly, inevitably, she let herself think about him. About the look on Callum's face when he saw the table she'd made from scratch. The warmth in his eyes when he told her she surprised him. The way his voice softened, subtly, absent-mindedly, whenever he said her name. No one had ever looked at her that way at work. None of her old managers, supervisors, colleagues. No one had ever shown her that level of trust or expectation, or whatever it was Callum projected with such effortless intensity. It scared her a little. It thrilled her a lot. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. Riley reached for it lazily, expecting a text from her neighbor or a random promotional email. Instead, the screen lit up with a single new message. From unknown number. Her breath caught. She opened it. I hope you made it home safely. Tiha. Riley sat up straighter, eyes wide, heart racing. Callum Hayes. Texting her. Personally. She stared at the message so long the screen dimmed. She tapped it awake again, still unable to believe it. What was she supposed to say? Thank you? Yes, home. Good. Safe. Alive. You melt my nervous system? She typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, she sent. Yes, I'm home. Thank you for checking. A moment later, her phone buzzed again. Good. Rest. You did more today than anyone could have asked of you. Riley pressed her free hand over her mouth to hold in a stupid, giddy sound. She typed back. I just wanted the meeting to go well. His reply came faster this time. It did. Because of you. Her cheeks burned. She lay back on the couch, staring at the ceiling, clutching her phone like it contained the world's most dangerous secret. Another message appeared. And Riley? She froze. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Least of all someone who works for me. Riley didn't move. Couldn't. Her heart beat against her ribs hard enough to hurt. She typed slowly. I'll try. His final message came a moment later. Good night. Riley stared at those 2 words long after her phone went still. Eventually, she whispered them into the empty room. Good night. But she didn't sleep for a long time. Let me know how you liked my story. And be sure to subscribe to our channel. A new story will be posted here tomorrow.